Welcome everybody. So today after the break, it's our first session that we're talking about and we'll continue where we left off. So last time we were talking about Bhagavad Gita chapter 16. And before we go into the details, let us start with an invocation from the Upanishads. So we'll start with a Vedic invocation. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sah Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. So welcome everybody. And as I was saying earlier, we'll start with where we left off. And this is Deva Asura Sampat Vibhaga Yoga, which is chapter 16 of the Bhagavad Gita. And in this chapter, you have to see the qualities of the Devas and the qualities of the Asuras, as mentioned by Bhagavan, as the qualities that leads you towards success in this life and after, and the qualities that leads you to failure in this life and after. Okay. So what we have seen, I'll read out the shloka and then we'll see where each word as we go. 16th chapter, shloka 2 is Ahimsa Satyamakrodhastyagha Shantirapaishunam Daya Bhuteshwaloluptvam Mardavam Hrira Chapalam. Okay. We have seen Ahimsa, which is non-violence, Satyam, truth, Akrodha, which is absence of anger, Tyagaha, renunciation, and Shanti. This is what we have seen in the last chapter, which is last session. This Shanti is peace. Apaishunam will come to this and continue with the qualities and we'll try to finish up to Achapalam. Apaishunam is not finding fault. Pishunata. Pishunata is a word that is used to people who pick a fault with others or nitpick or go and gossip behind the back. So qualities that leads to the blame game type of things, which commonly you see around in a community or an organization that is toxic. Okay, initially it starts with one person and slowly as people fall into the trap, the entire pond is poisoned, so to speak. So apaishunam is very important for a leader and very important for anybody who is a sadhaka, who is progressing towards a spiritual upliftment. A great minds, this is one of the things my father told me when I was a child, and it stuck with me. And I always tell this to my kids also, and to many of the people I meet. It's a great saying that says, great minds discusses ideas. An average mind discuss events, and small minds discuss people. What it really means is, when you get together in a party, a social club, or even on WhatsApp or a Zoom call, think about what type of topics you end up speaking. The people who are adhama, madhyama, and uttama. Adhama means the low kind of the small minds start talking about other people, more like gossip. He said, she said, or the qualities of the person. Hey, did you hear what he said? And it's always about the negative aspect of things. And you want to see how many of your circles or even yourself tend to get into that kind of a trap, and you want to elevate yourself. The average minds talk about events. They talk about, hey, what happened at the hockey game or the soccer game? Or, did you hear about the cricket score? Those are all events that are happening. So if most of your discussions are dominated by events, then you, at the end of the day, you feel great, but you think, okay, what have I spent this 3 or 4 hours time on? Sometimes you have that feeling. And lastly, but not the least, you also have people who get together and discuss ideas. And idea-based discussions always leads to upliftment, right? So it could be a small party and somebody talks about, hey, did you hear about this person? But rather than talking about the person, you can talk about accomplishments, ideas, or how to change, right? So that is apaishunam. is always about the third grade of people, which is the small minded people. There's a difference between fault finding and criticism. So don't think that if you're saying something negative about a person, it's always bad. Teachers do that, because they want to make kids, you want to bring about a positive change. And we'll see the difference between what is critiquing and what is criticizing. One has a positive outcome, the other is useless and has a negative outcome. So critiquing comes from a position of expertise, whereas criticizing is from a position of ignorance. A critic always has the intention to help because they have solutions. They're selfless, and the critique is constructive. It's based on an action and very, very specific as to a modification of behavior or a mistake that has been done, right? And it analyzes the behavior and not the person. Whereas the criticizer or a blame, somebody who blames you, always tries to insult or belittle or make you feel bad. And this is what is Pishunata. Okay. It is selfish and destructive. Somehow they find some kind of a happiness or satisfaction by blaming others. And it's very vague or generalized. Always, you are always late, or you never hear my, those kind of things. It's always a you always or you never, very general. And it accuses the person without giving them a grip on how to correct the issue. Okay. We have to move away from criticizing to critiquing in order to be a great leader. Okay, when we talk about colleagues or in a meeting, always try to see what kind of statements are a criticizing statement and which ones are a critiquing statement. And if you come across a person who's a criticizer or a blamer, you can stop them. You don't have to feel bad about it. Maybe they are hurting and they want a solution for it. So you can always ask a question as to, I totally hear you, I understand you. Is there any way we can make this better for you? Right? So the conversation becomes from a blame game to a positive one, a constructive one. Now I want to bring this to your attention because most often, what do we do with kids? It's always, you're bad, you didn't do your homework, you didn't do this, you didn't do that, or stop doing this and that, right? It's always stop doing something. It's more of a psychological thing that the brain does not understand the word no or don't. It cannot process it, right? When you ask a person to stop doing something, the brain kind of freezes. It doesn't know what to do next. It knows how to stop, but that doesn't give a solution, right? So stop littering. Okay, fine. Now what do I do? Instead of saying stop littering, you should say, okay, why don't you actually collect it and put it somewhere else? So you have to start channeling rather than negating, right? So doing this will increase a person's confidence level rather than blaming them. When you are blaming your kid, remember this: you're setting them up for failure and insecurity in their life in the coming days. Okay, always remember that. One of the best examples of a leader who is all encompassing and uplifting is Sri Rama. Okay? Now, Hanumanji has accomplished so much. He is, the right hand man of Rama, and Rama actually goes out and appreciates him. But he doesn't stop there. He even takes note of the smallest of small help that anybody can do in their capacity and uplifts them and makes them feel accomplished and good about themselves. So, if for most of you, if you might know the story of the little squirrel, it is apocryphal, and the story directly is not from Valmiki Ramayana, but is a nice story that goes along, and I've heard it in my childhood. So, when Sri Rama, with the help of all the Vanaras, were constructing a bridge to Sri Lanka, all the Vanaras, they get together and they are mighty Vanaras, right? And they start building a bridge that is 100 yojanas, and it took 5 days to build it. And it's not just them, the Vanaras that did it. Everybody around started helping this big project. When great endeavors are done, everybody comes along and starts helping it. Among them was a squirrel, a tiny little chipmunk that went, dipped itself in the water, and took some sand on the tail and started putting it on the rocks or between the rocks. And it would keep running back and forth, not mindful of its own fatigue. And Sri Rama was observing it, and he took it in his hand and asked, "What are you doing?" The squirrel said, "I'm helping you." And Rama did not say, "You're too little to help. You go away, or it's going to be, a waste of your time," and all those things. What he did was he took it and lovingly encouraged it, and he was totally moved by the sacrifice and the industriousness of that little squirrel. Great lesson from this is every leader should recognize the tiniest of tiny actions from anybody. And I believe that nobody in this world is wrong or does things because they want it to be wrong. It is their learning level, their capacity that makes them do what they want or what they behave. And it's for you as a leader to recognize that and bring out the great positivities in them and appreciate them and make them feel valued, right? So, great example from Rama on how to be apaishunam. So, we are looking at the positive quality of apaishunam, not just the blame game, but how to be on the positive side. Now, positive reinforcements change the behavior for the better, whereas blaming and criticizing creates a negative or stabilizes the negative behaviors and blocks the change. So, the person you're trying to criticize will always end up resenting you and will continue, not only continue the bad behavior, they'll start avoiding you, which actually makes you impossible to give further advice. So, even at least at home, make sure that your children feel that they're valued, and all the constructive criticisms you give them are actually constructive with their buy-in, right? Sometimes it might be harsh, but they have to understand that when you're questioning them, you're not making them feel bad about it, but you want them to change or be self-reliant. So that is the kind of bond you want with your children, your spouse, your neighbors, your co-workers, and then finally the citizens around the world, right? That is a great quality to have, apaishunam. Now I'll end with the last thought, which is the opposite of anger is not calmness, it's empathy. We'll come to empathy later on, but this is a great quote that I thought everybody should uh, just understand. Okay. The next quality is bhuteshu daya. So the actual shloka says daya bhuteshwalo luptvam, right? Bhuteshu daya. That is compassion in all beings, not just human beings, not just animals. It's animals, plants, and every being, including nature, meaning you have to have respect and kindness even towards inanimate objects. Now, one of the best examples I've seen of this is the Shiva Kutumba or Shiv Parivar, right? Now, Shiv Parivar, if you see, I found this wonderful example of coexistence. So there's Shiva with his, Vahana, which is Rishabha, and Parvati Mata with her Vahana, which is a lion. So you can see their vehicles or Vahanas coexist with each other. It's an environment or culture of fearlessness and of coexistence and collaboration. You have the bull and the lion, and you have the mouse or the shrew and the cobra coexisting. Cobra and the peacock, they are coexisting, and you have the deer and the lion coexisting. Coexistence and fearlessness, right? And compassion towards all. All this comes when a great leader actually makes that environment happen. Most of the time, what we have seen, even from the schooling days, is we have driven towards a culture of fear, a culture of shame, and a culture of guilt. So we have to get away from that. India or all of dharmic religions, so to speak, or Indic religions, so to speak, are not a guilt based teaching. They are a compassion based teaching. Compassion is the center of dharma, right? So, dhaya, if you look at Jaina Dharma, compassion becomes the forefront. If you look at Bauddha Dharma, compassion becomes the forefront. If you look at Sanatana Dharma, compassion is the core of it. Okay. And what you will find very strange about this teaching to Arjuna at this point is you're sitting in the midst of a battlefield Kurukshetra. And Bhagavan is asking Arjuna to practice daya, right? But Arjuna was already ready to run away. He already started, the whole conversation started with him saying, I don't want to kill my guru or my grandpa, all my relatives, right? That was daya. But this daya is towards all beings and it has to be applied at the right time at the right place. Okay. Now, going on, I want to show you daya is not limited to just the animals, sorry, just human beings. It also cuts across species and extends to animals. And we can see example after example after example. So here we are seeing a chimpanzee and a white tiger, bonding, and they have absolutely no fear of each other, and they're so happy. And one of the other examples I want to bring is from, I think, Gujarat. This is a very famous instance of a leopard or when it was a cub, it lost its mother and it was feeding off this cow. So basically, the cow used to give it milk and they formed a bond. And this leopard, I think it's now in its teen. And every night it comes to the village and it sleeps with the cow because it feels more protected. It feels very welcome and warm. And you can search it on the internet. There's the cow leopard Gujarat or something like that, and you'll get this in Google Images. And it's a very heartwarming story. Same thing with a lion and a fawn, a little deer. The beauty is a lion feeds only when it's hungry. Otherwise, it could coexist with its the prey, and they have a heart too. You can see, I've seen videos or documentaries of a lion protecting a monkey's cow, little monkey, and keeping it safe. And all this is called daya bhuteshu, qualities of success. Now I want to tell you a story, and this is very important because most of us don't know much about South India and how it is and all. South India has multiple or had multiple dynasties: Chera, the Cholas, the Pandyas, and the Pallavas, etc. So this story is supposed to be an actual one of a great king called Manu Nidhi Chola. That's not his name, but Manu is Manu Dharma, like Manu Smriti or Manu Dharma. And this king was so good at upkeeping the law of Manu. And one instance that is always told of him is one day when he was sleeping, and in his kingdom, nothing went wrong. Everybody was safe, everybody followed Dharma, and it was a perfectly well run, well oiled machine. And one day, the king hears the bell. It's called the Dharmaganta. So basically, when a citizen has an issue, they come and they ring this bell. And that bell, it seems, had never been rung ever because nobody had really an issue. No demand for justice from anybody, no protesters. And one day he heard it at midnight and he came and saw a cow was ringing this bell. And the king was surprised. Why is it ringing the bell? And when he came and saw or inquired about it, he found out that the cow's little baby, the calf, had been run over by a chariot. Some reckless driver had run over, and killed the calf, Gauhatya. And the king did not dismiss this as, a stray incident, chalo, let's give you a compensation or something. He made sure he found out who the person was, and it turned out that the prince, the son of Manunit Choya, was the culprit. In his younger, adrenaline rush, he was driving his chariot very fast and it ran over the calf. And that was the end of the story. It was pretty sad. So the king decided that he is going to give a proper punishment and bring about justice. So he ensured, and this is the thing, he made his son lie on the streets and I'm sorry, and he ordered that uh, a chariot be run over him. It chokes me even to talk about it because it shows the greatness of India. Sorry, I'm kind. It shows the greatness of India that a creature, even a smallest of small creature or big creature, was treated with equanimity by the great kings. And there is a certain pain in my voice when I say this, that this India has disappeared. And what we see now is, Dharmaglani, right? So here what happened in the scene, if you can see it, is Manunidhi is laying his son down on a road and ordered that he be crushed by the chariot. And that brought about the justice. And this scene is so powerful that the entire scene, and this is Manunidhi Chora, and you can see here is the cow asking or seeking justice, and here is the son crushed under the wheel of the chariot. And this is a statue that still stands in front of the Madras High Court even today. And that is the greatness of a person who upkeeps dharma. Okay, so give me a second to compose myself. Okay, moving on. This, most of us do not know about Chora, right? Cholas. Two things I want to tell you about Cholas is one, they are actually mentioned in the Valmiki Ramayana. When Sugriva asks Hanumanji and Jambavan and everybody to go southwards, and he asks also other Vanaras to go on different directions, north, west, east, and all. And when he talks to Hanumanji, he gives you the route through which to go, and he mentions multiple kingdoms through which to pass. So you also have Kalinga among it, and you have the Chola dynasty or the Chola kingdom among it. So you pass the Cholas and on and go. So Chola dynasty is as old as Ramayana itself. Okay. Second is, I want to show you around the 1000 to 1500 years ago, the extent of the Chola kingdom or Sora kingdom was, the blue marks here is South India and Sri Lanka was actually their dominion with the headquarters at Tanjore. And their, what do you call it, the vassal states, so to speak, the influence, the circle of influence went all the way through Thailand onto, what do you call it, Kadaram, which is Malaysia, Indonesia, and Vietnam, and all those places. So you can still see a lot of temples built by when the Cholas were in power, the same kind of what do you call it, the architecture and all those things, you can find it in those places, and Hindu temples there. So this was something I wanted to tell you while we were talking about Chola dynasty. Less to do with Bhagavad Gita, more to do with history. Okay. And last, I'll end it with leadership is about empathy. It is about having the ability to relate and connect with people for the purpose of inspiring and empowering their lives. Most leaders are drunk by power and end up being bosses or managers. The moment you kind of transgress that, it's not about yourself and your career growth, it's about cultivating more leaders. And when you start looking at leadership, you completely become or you change the game. If you're running an organization or you're a manager of a team, doesn't matter, even a family, the moment you transgress and start empowering people to make the decisions, your stress level goes down and your effect and influence increases. And you can start doing it within your own community. And this is a great way to start empathetic leadership, right? So that is Bhuteshu Daya. Aloluptvam. Aloluptvam. Loluptvam means running after something, coveting something, greed, lust, or I want it. So it's more like me, and wanting, right? So the grabbing. And that is something that we have to give up to be a leader, because the moment you hang on to something as attachment, you become selfish. And a person who's selfish cannot think past what you call a small circle. So it'll be like short term thinking, and it'll always be about insecurity, about tying myself down to my chair, kissa kursi ka kind of things. Aloluptvam is a very important quality for a leader to progress. There's not much to talk because it's common sense, but we'll go a little into it as to why greed and lust is bad. it actually dissipates or distracts your mind, right? And it makes you angry or frustrated when you don't achieve what you want. So let's say you have a plan, I want this, but you can't get it. What happens? Your mind just goes off into a fit of rage. Because of that, your thinking is muddled, and you can see this in earlier chapters of the cycle. So basically, dhyayato vishayan pumsaha sangastesu upajayate, sangat sanjayate kamaha, kamat krodo abhijayate. I'll explain this soon. Krodad bhavati sammohaha, sammohat smriti vibhramaha, smriti bhramshat buddhinashaha, buddhinashat pranashyati. Meaning, the more and more you think about an object, you form a bond with it, right? You feel an obsession with it. Then it becomes the only thing that drives you, right? Sangas teshu upajayate, sangat sanjayate kamaha. So kama is born within the desire. And because you don't get it, that desire leads to anger. Anger leads to frustration, which destroys your ability to think. And when the ability to think or irrationality sets in, you'll start doing things that will destroy you and destroy those around you. So that is why you have, it's very important not to get too attached to things. So that's why this is loluptvam is bad. Okay. Ambition is good. Loluptvam is bad. So aloluptvam. Okay. The measure of success is the happiness and peace of mind. The more and more you train your mind to be, you know, mature, it's easier for you to be more happy. Next quality, I think we are good, okay on time, is gentleness, mardavam. The word comes from mrudu. Mrudu is very gentle, nasuk, right? Mrudu. Mardavam is gentleness. It is very important quality of a leader. A leader who is harsh is effective for a while because they are driving a culture of fear. But after a while, what happens is a culture of fear will drive away anybody who is capable and who is creative. So you'll end up with people who are either yes men or people who are incompetent, right? So an organization that has a very harsh leader, a dictator, so to speak, will end up having absolutely nobody except for the dictators, like the mirror images of the dictator. So I want to bring about a story here. Again, today is more of a story day. So Mrudu, Mardavam, gentleness brings about a thought about a great king who lived. His name was Shibi Chakravarti. And these are the stories that we need to tell the kids. And, it becomes part of their growing up. Now, what happens is schools teach you a lot about science and math and other things, but they stop teaching you morality, about qualities. So what happens is you grow up in a very competitive world about how I can get better than the other person, even at the cost of others. We have to learn great stories like Rama and Krishna and Shibi to build a great society. So I'll tell you the story of Shibi for those of you who don't know. Shibi, like Manunidi Chora, was a very just king, and he was perfect to the core in administering his kingdom. And he was known for his justice. Like for him, justice stood above all, and kindness for others. So one day, in order to test him, the Devas decided to test him. So one day, when he was at his mahal, there was a dove or a pigeon that came and dropped in front of him. It looked weak and it was shivering with fear. And that pigeon was asking for mercy, Sharanagati. Sharanagati is basically, I surrender unto you, please protect me, right? Atmaraksha. And the king said, sure, I'll protect you at all costs. Don't worry about it. And a few minutes later, there was a falcon that was chasing it. So basically, the falcon had been chasing the dove and it wanted to eat it because it's its prey, natural prey. So the falcon comes and asks the king to spare the pigeon to it. He says, that is my prey. And this was speaking, right? Both the pigeon and the both the birds were speaking. Now the falcon says, "Hey Shibi, I need my prey, and you're obstructing it. Please give it back to me, right? Because you are a very just king, and for you, justice is above all. And you're obstructing my food and keeping me hungry." Right? And the king said very flatly, "I totally agree with you, but I can give you anything else. You can feed off, anything you want in my palace, but spare this because I've already given my word to the pigeon." This is called standing by your word. And there's an argument that goes back and forth between the hawk and Shibi Chakravarti that is full of dharma. It resonates of dharma. Long story short, the king finally says, "I will not give up my word. So, what I can do instead is, if you're okay with it, I will give you my own flesh so that you can feed off me. Weight for weight, meaning whatever the pigeon's weight is, I'll give you flesh off my body." And the bird thinks about it. It says, "Yes, I'm fine with that because I need to be eating. I'm hungry." And you can see scene number two is the king starts cutting his own flesh. So he cuts his thigh, the flesh, puts the bird on one side. Sorry, when I say the bird, the pigeon. And he starts cutting out small bits of flesh about the pigeon's weight, so 2 pounds, 3 pounds. And to the surprise of him and surprise of everybody, he sees that the scale doesn't go down. The more and more pound he adds to it, the bird is just sitting there, but the weight doesn't match, right? So any amount of flesh he puts there, it's not enough to cover the weight that the eagle needs or the hawk needs. Finally, the king says, "Okay, I don't know what's happening, but I'm going to give my entire body to you." So he sits in the scale himself, and at that time, the scale balances, and the hawk and the pigeon reveal their true identity. It is Indra and Agni who have come to test him. In this case, the story ends with a happy ending, which is Indra and Agni bless him, and they say, "You passed your test as to, you stand by your word and you're kind towards all." But in real life, a test of a leader is truly in how kindly he looks about everything and stands up for the team or protects his team, right? So the virtue, it's called a punya, it's called a deva guna, a punya, and that's what we're discussing today. It's the deva guna or the daivi guna that Shibi Chakravarti had exhibited that day. If you can do it now and with your own loved ones, it would be a great start. And all these things are very implementable gunas, right? They are not up in the air. It's very implementable, and you can start it with your own family. Now, I want to end this with a quote, as I always do, which is, "Be strong, but not rude. Be kind, but not weak. Be bold, but not a bully. Be humble and not timid, and be proud but not arrogant." Okay. The last one, I it resonates a lot with me. You have to be self-confident, you have to be assertive without being arrogant. Confidence says, "I can do it." Arrogance says, "Only I can do it, nobody else can do it." And if other people try to do it, you kind of get angry about it or you get frustrated. So there's a difference between arrogance and confidence. So the whole of this quality is Mardhavam. Be soft but not submissive. Be gentle but not afraid. Okay. Next quality is Hri. Now we say Hrim, right? But Hri is basically modesty or humility. Humility is the first step towards learning. A person who is arrogant has what we call a fixed mindset. They think they know everything and they are afraid of growth. And we'll talk about an experiment that was done later outside of this topic. But humility is the first step towards learning, and you cannot learn until you're humble enough to realize there is more to learn. And when you have a humble attitude, you will go to anybody and everybody, and the world becomes your teacher. Just like Avaduta, Dattatreya, he had 24 gurus, or it said in the Avaduta Gita that he has 24 gurus. including a hunter and a stork and a tree and different kinds of non-human gurus. Basically, you can, if you're set to be a learner, you can learn from everybody and anybody. There is no person on earth from whom you cannot learn, including bad people. You can learn from Ravana how not to be. You can learn from Duryodhana how not to be, right? So learning, the world is ready to teach you. Are you ready to learn? That is the question. Now, Hri, most of you know the story of Krishna and his famous friend Sudhama, right? Now, Krishna and Sudhama, they grew up with Sandipini. And one was a very poor Brahmana, and Krishna was the king of Dwaraka, or even before that, he was the grandson of Ugrasena Maharaj, right? And he never had this. And this is one great thing about Gurukulam system is it treats everybody equally, right? And there are some exceptions like Drupada and Drona, where there is arrogance among one of the students. But in this case, Krishna truly exhibited what we call Hri, or humility. The moment Sudhama comes, for those of you who do not know Sudhama was an ex-classmate of Krishna who lived in absolute poverty. And one day he's so poor that he cannot afford to even sustain himself on a day-to-day basis. So his wife suggests that he goes and meet the Lord of Dwaraka and at least get a couple of things, enough money to sustain themselves as a family. And Sudama goes off with a small packet of, they don't have anything to even bring as a gift. So he takes a small packet of poha and he goes off to meet Sri Krishna. And he's made to wait at the gate because the gatekeepers do not recognize him. And he doesn't look like a visitor, that's a VIP, right? So he says, I'm a classmate of Krishna. Please tell him that I have come. Just tell him that, and that's enough. And if he says no, I'll go away. And Sri Krishna at that point is playing dice with his beloved. And the gatekeeper comes, the messenger comes, and he says, there's somebody called Sudama. He looks something is not worth your time, but I'm just telling that he's come there. Krishna immediately leaves everything and he rushes. He, when you meet a friend that you have not met in years and years, there's a joy that jumps out of your heart. So both these friends, they do what is called an alingana. They hug each other. They enjoy that moment, and Krishna takes him in and treats him royally. And this is one of the scenes from that. It's a very famous scene of Krishna washing his feet and sprinkling that water on himself. And he feeds him, he clothes him, and Sudama stays with him for like 2 or 3 days. At the end of it, Sudama has totally forgotten what he came for because he's so happy to see his friend. And now the time has come to go back. He doesn't want to say it again, right? So the whole story as to what happens later is for you to read on the net. I'm not going to tell you what happened. But the story here, or the main thing here, is the attitude of a great leader on how you treat others with modesty. You do not come from position of, I have my position, I have my $1 million or $1 trillion. You're a human being first, and you're everything else later, right? A great leader connects with people the correct way and serves them. There's only one reason you're put on earth, is to serve others. Paropakarartham idam shariram. Always remember that part. Okay. And what we call in an organization as servant leadership. Back in the 50s and 60s, there used to be a very hierarchical method of leadership where all the decisions are driven top down, right? You have a traditional leadership with the CEO or the board of directors sitting at the top, and then you have middle managers or top level directors, then you have the middle managers, then you have the employees and other vendors on the side and such. World has changed, at least in the creative space. The world is changing very fast. It's going from a traditional leadership of top down approach to a bottom up approach. So basically all the employees are free because they are knowledge workers, they're creative, and they can actually give the solutions. You're hiring great people for that, the talent, right? Like CEO Steve Jobs says, hire great people and allow them to do what they do best and get out of their way, right? If you're telling them what to do, then you have two problems. Basically, you're getting in their way. So you have not hired people to, they should tell you what to do. You should not tell them what to do. So that way, it's becoming a servant leadership. There's one and only one job of a leader is to remove the impediments of the team and encourage them to be the best they can be. If you can understand this, you understand servant leadership. And the greatest leader, servant leader that I can think of is Hanumanji. Now, he is the only God that we know who is a dasa, who is a servant or who is humble and serves, right? He is respected as a God, but he is the greatest of leaders. Now, one thing I want to tell about Hanumanji is on the bank of, sorry, on the beach, before jumping off to search for Sita Mata, every Vanara is actually measuring the ocean, which is 100 yojanas. And one of the Vanara says, I think Nala or Neela says, I can jump 10 yojanas. And another says, I can jump 20 yojanas. Angada says, I can jump 100 yojanas. I can cross to the other side, but I cannot come back because by then my energy would be depleted. And while all these people are talking about strategies to cross the ocean, Hanuman is just sitting there quietly. He's thinking about, he's just looking at the ocean and not thinking much until Jambavan comes and reminds him of his power. Hanumanji is so humble and so engrossed in Ramanama that he has even forgotten that he has the power to jump. That is the level of humility that he's exhibited. He is Ashtasiddhi Navanidike Data, right? He is the master of all the eight siddhis and he is the direct disciple of Surya Deva himself. And he has the power to even subdue Shani Deva and teach a lesson to Narada and Garuda, Garuda Garbhabanga. He has the power and he could have destroyed Sri Lanka all, when I say Sri Lanka, Ravana's kingdom all by himself. Not to, I mean, and he did not do so because he wanted his master, his Swami, to have that glory. He himself says that, and that is the power of a servant leader. Have the power, but use it to serve others. And that should be the only thing that a leader should do to encourage and motivate others and bring about the change around you. I think I might have repeat, and maybe I'm repeating myself, but one of the things I've told my kids when we were, when they were little, is most parents worry about their kids turning into teenagers and getting into bad company, right? Don't worry about bad company because company is company. Teach your kids to be leaders, to be grounded, and to be secure. If they are strong, they can go into a bad company and change them for good. If they are weak, the company will change them for bad. That's all it is. And Narada can go in and change others. Shankaracharya can go in and change others because they have the strength. Even a Valmiki or Angulimal, Buddha could change it. So if your kids, you are strong, you can change others. Otherwise, expect yourself to be changed or consumed. And that is the key to self development. So think of Hanumanji, the humility, and how to take that into your leadership. Okay. And last quality of this shloka is achapalam, chapalata. Chapalata literally means fickleness or wavering. People don't have a stable mind. They want to jump from one thing to the other. Today they'll have one, let's say one fancy, and tomorrow they'll go on to some other fancy, and the mind keeps on jumping and they cannot make decisions. So the quote from Swami Vivekananda that I really liked in this subject is avoid excessive merriment, because a mind that in that state will never become calm and it becomes fickle. It keeps on jumping. Excessive merriment will always be followed by sorrow. Tears and laughter are their kin. So basically, people so often run from one extreme to the other because they want sensory fulfillment, right? And people who are so totally fickle cannot have stability. And the entire core message of Gita is to bring about stability and maturity of the mind. Samatvam yoga uchyate is the key of Gita. Now, why is it bad for a leader? Is chapalata or wavering and fickle mind stops you from making decisions or good decisions or any decision, even bad. It stops you because your mind is going from one extreme to the other, it's jumping around, it's thrashing. And in a moment of crisis, forget crisis, and even in a moment of happiness, your mind will not function because it doesn't know what choice to make. And leadership is all about making the effective choices at the right time and immediately with execution, right? So, wavering and fickle mind is driven by impulses. It just wants to jump. And people who are fickle have questionable loyalty because they cannot be anybody's friend. Today they'll be this friend, tomorrow, somebody else more popular comes along, they'll move away. They might be passionate, but they're unstable and unpredictable, right? And you cannot trust, or they have the inability to trust others and are not able to keep that trust. Fickle people, when I say fickle, I'm talking about extreme fickleness. And most of the decision making is extremely short term. Even though I said short term planning, it's extremely short term planning or momentary planning because there's no plan. And you cannot count on them in any situation where a decision needs to be made. And that is why you have to let go of fickleness and try to draw your mind back slowly but surely towards stability. Okay, that's why Swami Vivekananda said, don't go with extreme merriment, right? So too much partying, too much extremities is going to make your mind uncalm and wavering. Now, last but not the least, we're just getting to the conclusion. Wanted to say that the saddest thing about betrayal is that it never comes from your enemies. It comes from your friends and loved ones. And following on that is the next message that says, be careful about who you tell your feelings to, because some people are waiting for the opportunity to use that against you. Now, these two are very powerful and it follows the fickleness, but it's not just the immediate guna. We're talking about some of the other gunas that we saw, previously also, like Pishunata or Lolupthum. So all that ties into this. So when we talk about the Asuri qualities of negativity, we'll explore more of this betrayal and sadness. But understand, as a leader, you're given a huge responsibility of leading, right? And you have to be there for people. And for that, your position will not help you. Your influence and your personality alone will guide you, right? So you have to make sure that you cultivate yourselves. If sometimes you have to break and remake your personality over and over again. And I've done that many times. You kind of break yourself and remake yourself, rebuild yourself, one brick at a time. And it's not easy work, but it requires commitment, lots of introspection. Every time you have to introspect and see where you can make it better. You don't have to worry about where I've gone wrong. It's not blaming yourself, but what are the things I can do to make it even better, right? Even with the Bhagavad Gita sessions, I always ask, okay, what can I do better? Because improvement is the name of the game, always. Otherwise, the session becomes another boring lecture that is helpful to nobody. As long as you take this, even attending the lecture, so to speak, if you're attending this and forgetting the teachings, then it's of no use, right? So you have to take this, build yourself, and be proud one day to say, I have lived Bhagavad Gita. I've not studied Bhagavad Gita. I've lived Bhagavad Gita. And now I'm giving it to you. So that becomes more helpful to your children, right? So we are all living it and we are all living examples of it. Okay. So having said that, we'll just go over a quick, we'll read the shloka again, tell the Shanti mantra, and there's about 5 more minutes. If there is any questions, then we can go for that. अहिंसा सत्यमक्रोधस्त्यागः अहिंसा सत्यमक्रोधस्त्यागः शान्तिरपैशुनम् दया भूतेष्वलो लुप्त्वं मार्दवं ह्रीरचापलम्. Harihi Om. Om Purnamadah Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vasishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.